Okay, so you know that feeling, right? Like when you first start learning something new, you're all excited. You're gonna do it this time. You're gonna learn English.
Yeah,
You're gonna stick with it.
for sure, for sure.
But then, that feeling starts to maybe fade a little bit.
Right.
Or maybe you're just not sure, like, how to keep going consistently.
Yeah, I think that's something that everyone kind of struggles with.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
like how to create a system.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome.
It's how to consistently study English every single day
Perfect.
and how to establish those effective learning habits.
Love it.
And to kind of guide us on this journey, we have some really great resources.
Excellent.
So we have a YouTube video transcript from Anna Gomes. It's called Cómo Estudiar Inglés Todos los Días o que ninguém te cuenta.
Okay.
So that's like how to study English every day, what no one tells you.
I like it.
And then we have an article by Denilson de Lima, and that one is called Por dónde comenzar los estudios de inglés. Siga estas orientaciones. And that translates to basically where to start your English studies, follow these guidelines.
Okay, very cool.
And then we also have this just short text
Okay.
that just has some quick tips for learning English.
Great.
So basically what we're going to do in this deep dive is we're going to take all the key strategies, all the insights from these different sources,
Right.
and we're going to try to create a roadmap for you to let you learn English effectively and consistently.
Awesome.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
So one of the first things that I noticed in both the YouTube video and the article is that both of them talk about like defining your why.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why are you even doing this?
Yeah.
Why are you learning English?
I think that's such a good point. And it's something that a lot of people maybe skip over.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, I want to learn English, but like,
Why?
what is the thing that's driving you?
Yeah. Are you trying to get a better job? Are you planning to travel? Are you trying to, move to another country?
You're just doing it for fun.
Yeah, maybe you just want to watch movies without subtitles.
Exactly.
And I thought it was interesting because in the sources, they listed some reasons that people learn English. And these were things like higher education abroad.
Okay.
Career advancement.
Makes sense.
Travel.
Right.
And taking a proficiency exam.
Oh, yeah. Like a TOEFL or an IELTS.
Exactly. Yeah. So lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, like they said, to really figure out, like, what's your reason?
Yeah, I think it can really help to kind of solidify it in your mind.
Totally.
Like actually say it out loud.
Yeah.
Or write it down, like, this is why I'm learning English.
Yeah.
And then when you're having those days where you're like, I don't want to study.
Right.
You can go back and look at that and be like, no, this is why I'm doing this.
Yes, and that actually is something that Anna Gomes talks about in the video.
Okay, cool.
She says that, when you're feeling unmotivated, if you can really visualize that end goal,
Right.
it can help you push through.
Yeah, it's like having that carrot at the end of the stick, you know?
Exactly.
Like you're working towards something.
Yeah, and Denilson de Lima in the article, he talks about how you shouldn't really try to learn English for everything all at once.
Okay.
Like, don't try to be perfect at everything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right away.
Yeah.
He recommends, like, breaking down your goals into smaller chunks.
Okay.
So he talks about having, like, short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and he gives an example of, like, let's say your goal is to learn English for tourism.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of just saying, I want to learn English for tourism,
Right.
he says, like, break it down into the specific situations that you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
So, like, think about, okay, I'm going to be at the airport. I need to know how to, like, check in. I need to know how to go through security.
Yeah, get through customs.
Yeah, I need to know how to, like,
right.
order a taxi.
Order food, find my hotel.
Yeah, ask for directions.
Yeah, all those things.
All of those things.
That you would actually need to do.
Exactly. And then you can kind of, like, focus your learning on those specific situations.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and then it makes it feel a lot less overwhelming.
Totally.
Because you're not just thinking about, like, oh, I have to learn all of English.
Right.
You're thinking about, like, okay, I just need to learn these few phrases for this specific situation.
That's so smart.
And I thought it was really interesting because in that texto colado, the little short text, they also talk about focusing your studies on the things that are relevant to your goals.
Oh, wow.
So both of those sources kind of have that same idea.
So it sounds like a common thread.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah.
Focus on what's important to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like our first big takeaway, I think.
It's like define your why and break down your goals.
Absolutely.
Now, another thing that Denilso de Lima talks about in his article
Mm-hmm.
is that there's kind of this misconception about language learning,
Okay.
that it's all about grammar and vocabulary.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, like, just memorize all the grammar rules.
Wow.
Memorize all the words, and then you'll be able to speak English.
Right, and it's so not true.
Yeah, and he says that's not really the case.
Yeah.
He suggests a different approach.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So he says that instead of focusing on, like, individual words,
Yeah.
you should focus on learning what he calls chunks of language.
Chunks of language. What
Yeah.
does that even mean?
So basically, it's like complete phrases that are used in specific situations.
Oh, okay, so like instead of learning the word hungry
Right.
and then the word I,
Yeah.
you would learn I am hungry.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. I can see how that would be more useful.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it takes the pressure off of having to, like,
Conjugate verbs and like
Right.
remember all the grammar rules.
yeah, just like pre-made phrases that you can just pull out
Exactly.
when you need them.
And I thought it was interesting because this actually connects to what Anna Gomes says in her video.
Oh, okay.
She recommends like immersing yourself in authentic English content.
Okay.
So things like audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube videos, series.
Yeah.
And she really emphasizes like, try to understand.
Yeah.
Don't worry about understanding every single word.
Yeah, that can be really overwhelming.
It is. Yeah. It's like you're listening and you're like, I don't know what that word means. I don't know what that word means.
Right.
And then you just get totally lost.
And then you just give up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But she's saying like, just try to get the gist.
that's good advice.
Yeah. Just try to understand the overall meaning.
Yeah.
And she says that's how you really start to get a feel for how the language is actually used.
Okay, that's cool.
But she does have a caveat.
Okay.
So she says, like, don't just passively consume content. So don't just, like, have a podcast on in the background
Right,
while
yeah.
you're doing something else.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that.
I think we all have.
Yeah.
But she says, like, you really need to be actively engaged.
Okay, so, like, how do you do that?
So she says, like, you should be paying attention to the pronunciation.
Oh.
You should replay parts that you don't understand.
Okay.
And yes, you should look up words that are, like, crucial to understanding the main idea.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's about like really actively working to understand what you're hearing.
I like it.
Now, here's a really important point that Anna Gomes makes in her video.
Okay.
And this is something that I think a lot of learners struggle with.
Okay.
She says that discipline is actually more important than motivation.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because let's be honest,
Yeah.
we're not always motivated to study.
Absolutely not.
Some days you're just like, I don't feel like it.
Yeah, especially if you've had a long day at work or,
Yes.
you just don't have the
Yeah.
energy.
Right. And so she says that if you rely only on motivation,
Uh-huh.
you're not going to be consistent.
Yeah, because motivation comes and goes.
Exactly.
It's fleeting.
Yeah. And so she says you need to develop discipline.
Okay.
And she has this advice that I really liked.
Okay.
She says, ignore your feelings.
Ignore your feelings.
Yes. Like, just do it.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Like on those days when you're like, oh, I don't want to study. I just ignore that feeling and do it anyway.
Yeah, just push through it.
Yeah. Because you've set this goal for yourself
Right.
and you need to stick to it.
Like you made a commitment to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But she also gives some advice for what to do on those days when you're just like really not feeling it.
Okay, good. Because sometimes you just can't even,
Yeah.
like, make yourself open a textbook.
Right. And she says like you don't have to.
Okay, good.
Like she says you can change your study strategy.
Okay.
So instead of like doing a grammar exercise,
Uh-huh.
you could listen to an audiobook. You could spend like 15 minutes on a language learning app.
Yeah.
You could watch a short English video.
Something fun.
Yeah, something fun and engaging.
Yeah.
And she makes this really interesting distinction between like actually not having time to study
Uh-huh.
and just feeling unmotivated.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes you're like, oh, I'm too busy to study today.
Right.
But really, you're just kind of being lazy.
Yeah, or you just don't want to.
Yeah, and she's saying like you need to recognize that.
I see.
Because if you consistently give in to that laziness,
Yeah.
it's going to disrupt your progress.
Yeah, you're not going to make any progress if you're not consistent.
Exactly. And this actually ties in with the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is creating a study routine.
Oh, yeah, that's so important.
It is, and Anna Gomes actually mentions this in her video.
Okay.
She talks about how she sends a weekly schedule to her Telegram English club.
Cool.
Yeah, and so it's basically like a plan for what they're going to study each day. And I think the benefit of that is that it takes away the mental load of having to decide
Yeah.
what you're going to study every day.
That's so true.
You know, it's like you already have a plan.
Right. Like it's already decided,
Exactly.
so you don't have to think about it.
You just do it.
Yeah, you just follow the schedule.
And Denilson de Lima also talks about this in his article.
Okay.
He emphasizes the importance of organizing yourself and finding time to study every day, even if it's just for a short period.
Okay.
And he says that consistency is more important than like sporadic long sessions.
That's so true.
Yeah, it's better to study for like 15 minutes every day
Yeah,
than to study for like 2 hours once a week.
absolutely.
Now, one thing that I noticed in all three of the sources
Mhm.
is that they talk about the abundance of learning resources
Oh, yeah.
that are available.
The internet is full of them.
It is, yeah. There are books, websites, blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, apps.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, but it can also be really overwhelming
Oh, yeah, for sure.
because you're like, where do I even start?
Right, it's like paralysis by analysis.
Exactly.
You just get so overwhelmed by all the options.
And Denilson de Lima actually cautions against this in his article.
Okay.
He calls it accumulating content.
Accumulating content.
Yeah, so it's basically like when you download a bunch of apps
Uh-huh.
or you save a bunch of articles
Yeah.
and then you just never actually use them.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely done that.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
And so he says, like, instead of trying to do everything,
Mhm.
choose a few reliable resources and
Right.
focus on using them consistently.
Okay, that's good advice.
Yeah, and the Texto Colado actually gives some specific examples
Oh, cool.
of resourcing that you could use.
Like what?
So they mention Duolingo, Babbel, Memrise.
Oh, okay, I've heard of those.
Yeah, and then they also mention some dictionary apps like Google Translate and Lingy.
Oh, yeah, those are helpful.
Yeah, and they also say to use the internet as a tool,
Oh,
but don't get lost in it.
right. Don't go down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. You know? So like if you need to look up a word, use the internet,
Uh-huh.
but don't spend hours just browsing random websites.
Right.
And the Texto Colado also emphasizes the importance of like active immersion.
Oh, yeah.
So they talk about listening to music, listening to podcasts, watching movies and series in English.
Mhm.
And they say to start with materials that are at a comfortable level for you.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, like don't try to watch like a really complex documentary
Right.
if you're just starting out.
Yeah, you're not going to understand anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the Texto Colado also talks about the importance of finding study partners or conversation groups
Oh, yeah.
to practice speaking.
That's so important.
It is. And they give this really important piece of advice, which is don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Oh, my gosh. Yes.
Yes, because that's how you learn.
It's true.
You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah, you have to be willing to put yourself out there
Exactly.
and not worry about sounding perfect.
And they also have some other good tips like keeping a vocabulary notebook,
Oh, yeah.
using flashcards,
Uh-huh.
and not being afraid to ask native speakers for help.
Yes.
So basically, like every interaction is a learning opportunity.
I love that.
So we've talked about like setting goals.
Yeah.
We've talked about looking beyond just grammar and vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about the power of discipline and routine.
Yes.
And we've talked about using resources effectively.
Right.
But the thing that I think really connects all of this
Okay.
is consistency.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the underlying theme of all three sources.
For sure.
They all emphasize that regular, consistent effort is key.
Yes.
Even if it's just for a short period each day,
Yeah.
it's more effective than like irregular bursts of intense study.
Totally.
It's like the tortoise and the hare.
Yes. Slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Texto Colado has this really good reminder,
Okay.
which is to make learning enjoyable. So like incorporate activities that you actually like doing,
Yeah.
like watching funny videos, playing video games, reading comics in English.
Oh, that's great advice.
Yeah, because if you're enjoying it,
Yeah.
you're more likely to stick with it.
Exactly.
And Denilson de Lima gives this example of someone who's preparing for a trip,
Okay.
and they're like really focused on learning the vocabulary
Yeah.
and the phrases that they need for that trip.
Right.
And they're like actively trying to use English in their everyday life.
Cool.
And I think that's a really good example of how you can make learning more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's like you're not just studying.
Right.
You're actually using the language.
They're living it.
Exactly.
I love that.
So if we kind of like boil it all down,
Okay.
it seems like consistent English study and building those effective habits
Uh-huh.
really comes down to a few key things.
Okay. What are they?
So understanding your why, Focusing on learning language in meaningful chunks.
Okay.
Prioritizing discipline over fleeting motivation.
Right.
Establishing a regular study routine.
Yeah.
Choosing your learning resources wisely.
Yeah.
And making the process enjoyable.
I love it.
Yeah.
Those are great tips.
And as the Texto Colado reminds us, learning a language takes time and dedication.
It does.
Don't get discouraged if you make mistakes.
Right.
Or if you don't understand everything right away.
Yeah, it's a process.
It is.
That's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's something for you to think about.
Okay.
What is your most compelling reason for learning English? Like, why are you doing this?
Good question.
And then think about one small, actionable step that you can take today to put one of these strategies into action.
I like that.
Yeah. So maybe, like, what is your first micro objective?
Okay.
What is that one tiny thing that you can do
Yeah.
to start building that consistent habit?
It's a great place to start.
It is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope this was helpful. This was great.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Bye.